What do you think is the necessary number of English words for daily conversation?
I've read that around 1,000 to 3,000 words are enough for most conversations.
Really? I thought it would be higher. But it makes sense. Simpler is often better.
Yes, and knowing the right words is more important than knowing a lot of words.
How do you pick which words to focus on then?
I try to learn words that are common in my field of work and my hobbies.
That's smart. Tailoring your vocabulary to your daily life.
Exactly. And I also use language apps to find the most frequently used words.
Do you think watching movies or TV shows in English helps?
Absolutely. It's a fun way to learn new words and understand their usage in context.
I'll have to try that. Maybe it'll make learning feel less like studying.
Definitely. The more enjoyable the learning process is, the more likely you are to stick with it.
Have you ever done anything to maintain motivation for learning English?
Yes, I set small, achievable goals. Like learning 5 new words a day.
That sounds manageable. Do you reward yourself when you reach these goals?
Definitely. Sometimes I treat myself to a favorite snack or an episode of a TV show.
Nice. I think joining a language exchange group also helps. It makes learning more interactive.
That's a great idea. Speaking with native speakers can be really motivating.
Also, tracking progress visually can be encouraging. Like a progress chart or a journal.
Oh, I've never thought of that. Seeing your improvements over time must feel rewarding.
Yes, and immersing yourself in the culture helps too. Watching movies, listening to music, reading books in English.
Absolutely. It's about making English a fun part of your daily life, not just a subject to study.
What do you think is the best way to talk with native speakers in Japan?
Joining English conversation clubs or language exchange meetups is a good start.
I've heard about those. Are they easy to find?
Yes, there are many groups on social media platforms where you can find such events.
Also, attending international parties or events can be a fun way to meet native speakers.
That's true. But what if you're not in a big city?
Online language exchange sites can be useful. You can practice speaking via video chat.
Good idea. I hadn't considered online options.
Also, some cafes and bars in Japan offer language exchange evenings.
That sounds like a relaxed environment to practice.
Yes, and don't forget about apps that connect you with native speakers for conversation practice.
Right, I'll look into those. Thanks for the suggestions.
What kind of topics do you talk about when you do language exchange at cafes or bars?
Usually, we start with common interests like movies, music, or travel.
That makes sense. It's easier to talk about something you're both interested in.
Right, and sometimes we discuss our cultural differences and similarities.
Sounds interesting. How about language-related topics?
Yes, we often share funny or confusing experiences we've had with language learning.
That must be a good way to learn from each other's mistakes.
Definitely. And talking about everyday life, like work or hobbies, can be very engaging.
Do you ever talk about current events or politics?
Sometimes, but we try to keep the conversation light and respectful.
I see. It's all about finding common ground and enjoying the exchange.
Exactly. It's a great way to make new friends and improve your language skills.
Going back to the topic of vocabulary learning, how much time do you allocate to studying words in comparison to practicing conversation?
I try to balance it. Maybe 40% vocabulary and 60% conversation practice.
That's interesting. Do you focus on learning new words or reviewing ones you already know?
A bit of both. I find that using new words in conversation helps me remember them.
Makes sense. And how do you incorporate vocabulary learning into your conversation practice?
I often start by reviewing new words, then try to use them during the conversation.
That sounds like a practical approach. Do you ever find it challenging to use new words correctly?
Yes, sometimes. But making mistakes is part of the learning process.
True. Do you also learn phrases or idioms along with individual words?
Absolutely. Learning phrases helps me understand how to use the words in context.
That's a good strategy. It probably makes conversation flow more naturally too.
Definitely. It's all about finding the right balance between learning and applying.
Thank you for the insightful conversation today.
You're welcome. It was great sharing ideas with you.
I learned a lot. It's always helpful to hear different perspectives.
Absolutely. And if you ever want to discuss more, feel free to reach out.
I will. And let's keep each other motivated in our language learning journey.
Definitely. It's easier to stay motivated when you have someone to share the experience with.